NBA segment since we got some preseason games, and I think the season is maybe about 8 days away, 8 to 9 days away. So it's real close. It's coming up very quickly, but it'll be here before you know it. But before I get into the couple of stories I wanted to bring to you in regards to the NBA, I have to backtrack a little bit, and I got to give you some info on one of my updates that I gave you in the opening of the show. And I mentioned about John Gruden and some emails with some vulgar language and some racial things that he said in the email. And again, as always, once it gets out, the participants basically immediately release a statement of apology to try and smooth things over, if you will. But one of the things I mentioned, and one of the things that are bothersome to me, is something that we've talked about numerous times on this show, and that is the racial epitaphs or the racial issues involving these professional sports. And what it is John Gruden used a racist trope to describe executive director of the NFL Players Association, DeMaurice Smith, in 2011. And we all know DeMaurice Smith is an African American male who has been the president of the NFL Players Association for some time. And some of the things that were said in this email, and I quote, "DeMaurice Smith has lips the size of Michelin tires," end quote. And this is something that he wrote in July of 2011. He was then, like I mentioned, a commentator for ESPN. At the time that he wrote this email, the NFL was in negotiations with Smith to try and end the lockout. Druden is now the coach of the Las Vegas Raiders, and he told the Wall Street Journal that he didn't recall writing the email, but he's really sorry. I wish I had my button here, the WTF button. He didn't realize or recall writing the email. Dude, you wrote it. So I guess to try and save face, he went with the "I don't recall writing it." Well, there's proof because the email was flagged and people saw it. So you saying that you don't recall it is a little bit strange to me, if you will. I also feel like I said, he since said he's real sorry. He's really sorry. Then he goes on to say he was frustrated with Smith and the NFLPA at the time. He added that he used the term "rubber lips" to describe anyone he thought was lying. Well, in the email, you didn't say rubber lips. In the email, you said lips the size of Michelin tires, which is a difference. Okay? And for you to start off by saying you don't recall, and then you go and say you were frustrated, leads me to believe that you kind of did recall what you said, and you kind of meant what you said. Then he goes even further and he says, I was upset, and I quote, I used a horrible way of explaining it. I don't think he's dumb. I don't think he's a liar. I don't have a racial bone in my body, and I've proven that for 58 years, end quote. So we all know, usually when people have to say they don't have a racial bone in their body and all this other stuff, that is something there. So these emails will have been flagged and they will be looked into. I will keep my ear to the story and see what plays out and how it plays out, if there's any discipline or anything coming from the NFL executive offices in regards to these emails. And again, like I mentioned, he also used some vulgar language towards the commissioner. But this is what DeMaurice Smith had to say, and I quote, "This is not the first racial comment that I've heard, and it probably won't be the last. This is a thick-skinned job for someone with dark skin. just like it always has been for many people who look like me and work in corporate America. Okay, he also goes on to say, you know, people are sometimes saying things behind your back that are racist, just like you see people talk and write about you using thinly coded and racist language. Okay. Then he continues and he says, racism like this comes from the fact that I am at the same table as they are, and they don't think someone who looks like me belongs. I'm sorry my family has to see something like this, but I would rather they know. I will not let it define me. I'm glad to see and hear his positive outlook of it, and it's crazy because, like we said, it's still racism within professional sports. Whether the major conglomerate will want to truly admit it, which we know deep down inside they won't, but I had to get that out because it's an ongoing thing, and we saw it. Like I said, we saw it with ESPN, with Ramona Shelburne and Maya Taylor. You've seen it all throughout, going back as far as the Colin Kaepernick situation, and a lot of ways throughout, even prior to the Colin Kaepernick situation. So there is some racism in sports still evident. It's just a matter of when and how it comes out. So again, like I mentioned, I will definitely keep my ears to that story and see if anything happens, any discipline or anything like that with John Gruden in regards to that email and those racial tropes that he used in the email. And again, like I said, he said he didn't recall it, but then he goes into saying he's sorry and he tried to clean it up, but you kind of contradicted yourself with the things that you said after that. So we'll definitely keep an eye on that and see how this plays out. So moving on to our NBA segment. Like I said, we've got some preseason games tonight. I'll give you that schedule in just a little bit. Definitely got a Sixers game tonight against the Brooklyn Nets at the Wells Fargo Center, 7 p.m. But before I get into what I wanted to get, and I told you when I started talking about the Ben Simmons situation that I would probably have some information or some updates and anything just about every week until something happens, either he shows up or a trade is made. But like I mentioned in the open, now his camp has asked again. So like I said, I don't know how many times exactly they've asked about this, but it says again. So that leads me to believe that it's been more than once about getting some of those fines back. And like I said, from where I stand, from where I see in my thought process, somewhat understanding the business, not going to happen. So on another note, before I get into that, there were 18 former NBA players who were charged with pocketing about $2.5 million illegally by defrauding the league's health and welfare benefit plan in a scam that authorities said involved claiming fictitious medical and dental expenses. Wow. It says that the defendant's playbook involved fraud and deception. Let's see here. The prosecutors have travel records, email, and GPS data that prove the former players were sometimes far from the medical and dental offices at the time when they were supposedly getting treated. Guys, like, you can't do this in, as we like to say, the average Joe or the regular Joe, the regular working force. But you guys are dealing with larger amounts of money, larger businesses, major conglomerate, billion-dollar conglomerates, like I like to say. And of course, they're going to follow up. It was one instance where it was said that a former player was playing basketball in Taiwan when he was supposedly getting $48,000 worth of root canal and crowns on 8 teeth at a Beverly Hills, California dental office in December of 2018. This indictment said the scheme was carried out for at least 2017 to 2020, when the plan, funded primarily by NBA teams, received false claims totaling $3.9 million. Of that, the defendants received about $2.5 million in fraudulent proceeds. Each defendant made false claims for reimbursements that ranged from $65,000 to $420,000. Why did you guys think that you would get away with this? I don't know, but you got caught, and now we'll see what happens with this. How the NBA will try to recoup some of this money. Okay, there's another thing, and I quote: "The benefit plans provided by the NBA and the National Basketball Players Association to our players are critically important to support their health and well-being throughout their playing careers and over the course of their lives, which makes these allegations particularly disheartening," the NBA said in a statement. The NBA said they will cooperate fully with the U.S. Attorney's Office in this manner. So, they said the conspiracy was led by Terrence Williams, who began his career as a first-round pick in 2009. The indictment said he submitted 19,000 in fraudulent claims to the plan in November of 2017 for chiropractic care. The claims led to a $7,672 payout for Williams. Okay. The indictment said he then recruited other former players, to defraud the plan and offered to provide fraudulent invoices from a chiropractor and dentist in Southern California and wellness office in Washington State. At least 10 of the former players paid kickbacks totaling about $230,000 to Williams, according to the court. A lawyer who has represented Williams in the past declined to comment. So when they decline to comment, you know what I'm getting ready to say. You got to take that to heart. The Nets had selected Williams with the 11th pick in the 2009 draft. He went on to play for 4 franchises: the Nets, the Celtics, the Rockets, and Kings. Over 4 seasons as a role player, he averaged 7.1 points a game. He was waived by Boston 2 days after his 26th birthday in 2013. Also among the charge was Tony Allen, a 6-time All-Defensive Team selection, member of the 2008 championship Celtics, and it just goes on and on. So, folks, the others charged included 4 NBA champions: Glenn Davis, along with Allen, who was a part of that 2008 Boston team; Shannon Brown, who won 2 championships with the Lakers; Melvin Ely, who won a title with the San Antonio Spurs. Among others, former Sixer Tony Roten, Ruben Patterson, Darius Miles were the only players who averaged double figures for their NBA careers. So, you guys tried to defraud the NBA, a major institution that is definitely going to deal with you guys accordingly. And like I mentioned, you have an attorney for Sean Williams, who was the spearhead of this, who actually recouped doubly from this. He defrauded the NBA, and then he got other players to pay him for the fraudulent invoices and things. So we'll definitely see how that plays out. Now, moving on, once again, to this Ben Simmons situation. I just got an alert earlier, per Adrian Wojnarowski and ESPN, and it says that talks are progressing for Simmons to report to the team, although they are still trying to facilitate a trade. So we knew this would come, or we thought that this would come. Once you got a whiff of the fines, and again now with his camp asking for money back that they're not going to get. So now there's talk about him returning to the team. Yeah, dude, like I said, if you don't come to work, you don't get paid. And I broke it down for you last week, where if he goes through it the way he initially intended to go through it, he would be in the hole for at least $5.2 million. And again, folks, you have to remember, like I keep saying every time I talk about this, although a lot of fans are ready to see him go, because of the way he handled the situation. The Sixers, all in all, do not have to trade him because he is under contract for the next 4 years. So, the next thing that I want to bring to you, and this is going to take us out, it is something that I saw, and it fits right in line with what's going on. And I mentioned that there could be some similarities, it could be some differences. As I went through the article, I realized that there were a lot more differences in this situation than the two situations that I'm going to mention in going through this story. And there are a little bit more differences than there are similarities. So it says, as Ben Simmons and the Sixers square off, we take a look inside of what it's like when a star and a team divorce. So we all know the situation with how it started. Just to give you a little backtracking, a little history behind this whole situation. Ben Simmons ended the season on a sour note. The whole team actually did. But Ben Simmons' issues were more in the forefront than the entire situation. There was a lot of talk, a lot of blame being spread around, a lot of difference of opinions amongst fans and some media as to how, let's just say, side A treated side B, just to make it kind of blanket, to give you some type of idea where I'm going. But to put it frank, Ben Simmons over the offseason told the Sixers that he was not coming. And as the situation progressed, there was a different story or a different reasoning behind why he said that every single week or every other week. It also got to the point where his agent, who also represents another player on the Sixers team, tried to pull that player in and say that they wanted that player out as well. Almost, if not definitely, cost that other player some sponsorship money in regards to the city and businesses working with that particular player. So, we go back to the situation as we talk about a star and a team divorcing. We go back to the Jimmy Butler situation in Minnesota. Okay, and we're also going to tie in the James Harden situation in Houston. Okay, Simmons is sitting out training camp is really nothing new because we've seen it before. We've seen players say that they were going to sit out and all of this and that's whatever. But the way he handled it was, in my opinion, unprofessional, poor business tactics, and to somewhat put it blunt, it was like a whiny spoiled baby situation. Okay. As a star is wanting out can often be endangered by the pressures of media, fans, and sponsors from the outside. Those inside the organization that pride themselves on remaining focused on the game say that maintaining that concentration in the middle of such a tense situation can be definitely easier said than done. Stan Laws, thanks for tuning in. Blessings to you as well. So, Timberwolves went into a standoff, as we all know, with Jimmy Butler. And he mentioned that he didn't want to be there anymore. He told him he didn't want to be there. But then they went into a standoff with Butler and hoping to persuade him to come back. The Rockets, on the other hand, also with James Harden, said that they were not going to be forced to do a deal they did not want to do just because Harden wanted out. In the end, both players got what they wanted by making their disenchantment impossible to ignore. So, a lot of the lines in what Houston did are very similar to what the situation that the Sixers are in now. They're not going to just do a deal or make a deal just because Simmons allegedly wants out. It's not going to happen that way. What's going to happen if a trade does come about is the Sixers are going to make a trade that will benefit the team moving forward, not just to satisfy or even pacify Mr. Simmons in wanting out. So, again, I'm going to say it. They don't have to trade him because he's under contract. He can sit out. And like we just saw, and I just gave it to you, their talks are progressing about him reporting to the team. So they've gotten to him a little bit. And also his camp has again asked for some of that money back. So there's something there where on the Ben Simmons side of things, it's really getting to him. Now he's talking about maybe coming back, but they're still looking to trade him. Okay. So again, with his value, as people say, and I've seen a lot of stuff on social media where people are saying, "Oh, well, you don't do this and don't do that." Listen, Ben Simmons himself has hurt his trade status and his value by demanding first that he wasn't going to come to camp, and then by changing his story as it progresses up to where we are now. And like we said, most recently, he claims that his time with Joel Embiid has run its course. He cannot facilitate what he needs to do with him on the team with Joel Embiid. Joel Embiid rebutted and said that, I feel that's like borderline disrespectful because the teams that we facilitated in most recent years have arguably been catered to what he wanted, what his needs were. He also alluded to the fact that Jimmy Butler was allowed to leave because of the situation with Ben Simmons. And there's people that put stuff out on the internet and they try to save face and make their point. But you have to, if you're going to go that route, you have to put everything in there. You can't chop it up and go one-sided just because you feel like you're on Ben Simmons' side. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm giving you this because this is what I do. But I've said time and time again that the kid is talented, very talented. I, for one, have even went on a limb and said that I like the things that he does for the team. I just would like to see him improve on the offensive end of the court, or on the offensive side of the ball. Okay? A lot of people have said to me, "Oh, well, you'll be sad when he goes to another team and then he starts to shoot the ball and this, that, and the third." I said, I wouldn't be upset. I hope that does happen. I wish it could happen here. But we went through all the stuff where the flaws were there from the very beginning. But at the time, you can arguably say he was the consensus number one pick. So the Sixers had it and they went with it. Okay? We all know when you draft people, you take a chance anyway. Some players pan out, some don't. Some materialize or matriculate to what you think they will be. Some exceed what you think they might be, and some don't. Okay? So, as a star wanting out can often be endangered by pressures from the media and the sponsors and those other outside interests. The Timberwolves went about it in a way where they tried to get Jimmy to come back. Ultimately, both of those guys, Jimmy Butler and James Harden, did show up for camp. Jimmy Butler kept in contact with his teammates, and he did tell them that, it's nothing personal against you guys. It's the direction of the organization. I want to move on, and that's where I'm at with it. There's no change in my mind. But key part in this, he maintained communication. Ben Simmons, again, in my opinion, being the whiny, coddled brat situation, decided he wasn't going to talk to anyone. 3 players from his team even were willing to go and fly out to LA to talk to him. And we don't know if they were going to go and try and convince him to come back. Maybe they just wanted to know where he was. He declined. Okay. Daryl Morey went down that path, like he said, with the Aaron Rodgers thing, with that squabble. But you see, Aaron Rodgers came to work, he performed, and is performing well right now during the NFL season. Okay. He also says, and he continued to say, that they expect him to be a Sixer. So, like we just saw, talks are progressing for him to come back. The Rockets, in their quest to move Harden, they only did so. They were only going to move Harden that in a deal that they wanted to do, only in a deal that believed gave themselves flexibility and freedom, which is, I think, the same way the Sixers feel. Okay, that is where the Timberwolves ran into problems. It says Thibodeau had a few allies in the organization and a GM by his side who proved to be incapable of influencing decision making, and an owner who grew increasingly frustrated at Butler's antics grew more and more public. Okay, it's not even the elephant in the room. It's going to be a focal point of everything. On the team, you're going to feel tension in that locker room just because you don't know what's going on. But at the same time, that's where the coach's focus is. The front office's focus is. This is the big thing hanging over everyone's head about when is something going to go down, is something going to go down. So you, as that star player and wanting a divorce, you very easily put pressure on other players in that locker room, like I just read to you, because players don't know if they're going to be involved in the deal. They don't know how long it's going to play out. And in a lot of ways, you kind of get to the point where in that locker room, you want to just say, look, just get it done so we can move on and focus on what we need to focus on. Like I said, just feeling the uncertainty. This is a former player. So just feeling the uncertainty is going to be weighing on you with not knowing what is going to happen and when it's going to happen. Okay, like we said, a lot of times these types of deals often include several players and multiple teams. Obviously, there are certain guys who know they're not going to be included in the deal, but there is a higher percentage of guys in that locker room that could be on the move as well in some type of deal. That adds another factor to the whole situation, as well as for the guys who just would like the deal to be done, like I just said, and not have to worry about it anymore. While it's still playing out, agents are counseling their clients and trying to keep their focus on the court as much as possible, while also doing their own digging to try to prepare for a major change. So it covers and it hits a lot of people on the spectrum. You've got the other players who don't know if they're going to be involved, or they know that they're not going to be involved. You got the locker room where you think, all right, hopefully we'll get something done. We don't know when it's going to get done. And then, like I just mentioned, you got the agents who have to try and deal with their clients, and also on the other side, get prepared for a possible move of that client if it comes to that. Okay? So with the agent side, it's like you wonder if your client could be thrown in a deal, or it could result in your guy being moved or cut in order to make room for new players. So that's the tough part. Excuse me. You have players who could arguably be moved or not be moved, but once a deal is made, in order to facilitate the deal, some of those players might get cut or waived, which is a tough thing for some players. So getting back to the Jimmy Butler, he skipped media day, but he did come to practice, where he just acted out and tried to force the issue. Then he navigated the start to the season, where it became a regular question of whether he was going to be available or not on a particular night. Okay, so you have to make the decision or let him come, or you have to let him make the decision whether to come or not come. Where the mistake was made was allowing him to dictate when he showed up and when he didn't. That was the first mistake. He's going to show up when he wants. He's going to play when he wants. If you're not in, stay home. Which is arguably and basically what the Sixers said, or how they handled this this situation with Ben Simmons. If you're not in, you're not coming, okay, no problem. But we know the guidelines, and we know what will happen. Just like they didn't pay him that $8.2 million. We know the guidelines, and we know what leverage we have and what we can do and what things are in our favor. And they took full advantage of that. Okay. In the Harden situation, Harden and the Rockets maintained communication throughout the whole process. Harden also made it clear that he had no ill will toward the city or the franchise, just that he felt that had taken things as far as possible in his time there, and it was time for a change. Which I get. Sometimes that happens. But the difference is he maintained communication. And he put it on the line for the reason why he wanted to be moved. He felt like it was just time to go, time for a change. He had done enough there, didn't get to where they wanted to initially when he first went there, and it was time for a change. But he maintained communication, and this is where Ben Simmons' fault is in this. You allegedly cut off communication, which doesn't make it look good on your part. It went as far as DeMarcus Cousins at the time saying he felt like it was obviously disrespectful. Sound familiar? Some of what Joel said about what Ben Simmons said. But he also went on to say, and I quote from DeMarcus Cousins, "But everybody has a right to their opinion. We feel a certain way about his actions, but this is a nasty part of the business that gets swept under the rug. When guys are franchise players, it's usually a nasty breakup." And that's the case. Okay? Again, Jimmy Butler kept the lines of communication open with his teammates, and he let them know the decision had nothing to do with them. And that resonated with some players in the locker room who still to this day remain close to Butler. At least he was upfront and honest about his situation. Ben Simmons, being the man, should have been upfront and honest about the situation. If that's your standpoint, so be it. But you should have been able to communicate with your teammates and let them know where you were, where you stood. And then again, guys were not in the loop, confused about what was going on, made an attempt to want to talk to him, and he declined. So that, what kind of image or what kind of appearance does that give to your teammates, guys that you allegedly went to war with for the past several years? Okay. Again, Simmons went about this in a totally disrespectful and somewhat, in my opinion, as well, and in the wrong way. So, like we said, the other guys showed up for practice, although we did hear that they did what they did to make it hard to try and push their way out. They did do that, but they did keep the lines of communication open, which is very, very important. Where the consistency in that communication, where Jimmy Butler said, even with Thibodeau, went to talk to him and try and convince him, he told him, no, it's no talking. I'm where I'm at, and I'm telling you this up front, and this is what it is. Same thing with Harden. He kept communication with his teams and with the organization, with his teammates, in the organization, and let them know where he stood. With Ben Simmons, like I said, you arguably didn't know. You still don't know, because he cut off communication. So no one knows where his head is. No one knows if it's actually him giving up information or if he's being fed information to put out to the media. But like I said, once it got to the point where the fines started to kick in, and remember, if you listened, I didn't say anything about any fines or anything going on with the Harden situation or the Butler situation. Also, most recently, again with the Houston Rockets in the John Wall situation, John Wall has asked for a trade, they've come to a mutual decision. But John Wall also said that, I'll come to practice, I'm still going to come and do my job, I still want to be mutually on the same page and understand that I would like to be traded. Which is what you do professional. I've got my guy Claude Robinson in, and Claude says, "Here's the truth, bro. Regardless of how you feel about Ben, we are a better team with him than without." I agree with that, especially during the regular season. He deserves to be humbled. He deserves. Let's try and get this comment back. Let me see. Uh, I'm going to try and get it, Claude. Let me see if I can get it and try and get it back up here. I'm having a tough time working this, but I'm going to get this quote up and I'm going to see where we are with it. So let's do this. Let's get to the group, and we're going to get this quote, and I'm going to try to read this entire quote to you all as it is written in here. Okay, here we go. I've got it now. So I'm going to go back to the beginning. He says, "Here's the truth, bro. Regardless of how you feel about Ben, we are a better team with him than without." And like I said, I agree with that, especially during the regular season. Claude also says he deserves to be humbled. He deserves to be booed, but we all know once he begins playing and we are winning, those boos will become cheers. Oh, absolutely. It's good for us if he comes in because we get to see if he's improved. He can improve his trade value and the team is better. He's going to have to eat some humble pie. Totally agree with that as well. But if we want the best for the team, we as fans have to get over it and humble ourselves too. Claude, I like that. I totally agree with that. So I am right on that same page. And like I said, I am one who has consistently said, I like what the young man does. I like what he does for the team. But there's always room for improvement. We talk about it numerous times on this show. The greats always did something to improve their game. Kobe's, the Mikes, the other players that we can, there's a lot of names that we can give up. But we have to see some improvement. Okay? I have also gone on a limb and said that where I'm at evaluating the situation from my standpoint, I just feel like Ben Simmons is complacent where he is. He'll consistently tell you he's an all-star. He feels like he's a defensive player, the best defensive player in the league. He's always in that defensive player of the year conversation. But there's always room for improvement. We all know this. In everyday life and as far as that level of competition, there's always room for improvement. So you have to be humbled as well. And I think it's starting to get to him, like I said, where his camp has been asking about getting some of that fine money back. And now we hear that talks are progressing for him to come. But there's still going to be talk about attempting to make a trade. So, again, like Claude said, we're a better team with him than we are without him. I totally agree with that. But you have to improve. You saw the situation last year. You saw how the improvement base was with Joel Embiid. You saw the improvement base with Tobias Harris. But there was still the same thing with Ben Simmons. So, all in all, it's going to take a lot. He has to be humbled, like Claude said. And I think it's getting to him now where he's beginning to talk about coming in. And I think the Sixers understand that he wants to move on. We'll still try and facilitate a trade. But you have to come in and do your job to improve your value from where it has plummeted right now. He said at one point, he said it's not his job to do that. Well, then whose job is it? If it's not your job to improve your game and make your value go up, then whose job is it? So I think this thing is going to work in a way where, again, the Sixers and Daryl Morey are going to do what is beneficial for the team. They're going to make a deal. If they make a deal, it's going to be a deal that is going to benefit them the most. in the entire situation. And I think that's just where we are and where it stands. And that is that on that situation. And like I said, him going about it the way he went about it was totally uncalled for. At least you got to be a man and stand up and tell people where you stand. You can't go into it and expect them to immediately do something when you cut off all communication. Like I said, Jimmy Butler and James Harden, and most recently John Wall, kept communications open, but they made it clear what their stance was and what their situation was. That's a huge part in this type of situation. A huge part. Ben Simmons went about it the wrong way, and I think he's feeling it now, and I think at some point he may end up changing and eventually coming in. So, with that being said, on another note, you saw my post. I was at the blue and white scrimmage Saturday. I have mentioned this on several occasions since the NBA Summer League, where I saw the improvements in the game of Tyrese Maxey. Someone who wants to get better, someone who wants to work on his craft, which I think a majority of NBA players should do anyway. The blue and white scrimmage, it was short. A few players didn't play. A few players didn't play much. But some of the additions to the team this year, I think, can help. And like I said, one of those being initially the improvements in the game of Tyrese Maxey. The addition of Andre Drummond and the addition of George Niang, who I think will help the Sixers in the long run. I don't know how much as of yet, but I think they will help in the long run. And in this type of situation, you want something to happen, whether he comes and plays or whether a deal gets done. So if the deal gets done, you can bring players in and they can get acclimated with their teammates and they can move on and start to pursue the goals that they have laid out for this upcoming season. Shout outs to my guy, Joe Richmond, the ambassador of basketball for the Delaware Blue Coats, who's always working, who always makes me welcome, who always welcomes me in to events and things of that nature. So I definitely appreciate him for that. But again, this entire situation is going to be a little crazy, where we don't know completely how it's going to play out. Claude chimes back in again and he says, I love Maxey, I love Shake too, but we still don't have a real point guard. Drummond and Yang are great acquisitions. Yes, Claude, I agree with that when you say about those two additions and the improvements of Maxey. I'm trying to get to the other comments. Claude said here, yeah, that was it. Those are other comments. But again, I think the Drummond acquisition again and the Niang are going to be good acquisitions. And then there was a little quote from Niang, who said to the media that, you've got to play D. You got to give it your all here in a city like this. And, I mentioned to one of my friends who brought it to my attention, I said, it's amazing how a player who's been here for a couple months gets it that quick, when a player who's been here for years hasn't truly gotten it yet. So we will definitely see how all of this plays out. And again, like I said, you know us and you know me. I will definitely give you everything that I can in regards to this story. So just some notes here to add into this. We all know that there's going to be consistently and constantly a bunch of trade speculations, proposed trade ideas. So here are a couple that I saw. One was the Sixers and the Pacers, where the Sixers would get Malcolm Brogdon, Karis LeVert, and 2 future first-round picks for Ben Simmons. I've also recently saw that Ben Simmons was allegedly open to a trade to the Kings, who are not willing to give up De'Aaron Fox. Okay, but they are saying that they could give up Buddy Hield, Tyrese Halliburton, and or Davion Mitchell for Simmons. There's also been a 3-team with the Pacers, the Sixers, and the Kings, where the Pacers would get Ben Simmons and Seth Curry. The Sixers would in return get Brogdon, Buddy Hield, a 23 first round pick, a 25 first round, which is heavily protected, and the Kings would get Sabonis. There's also been a 5-team trade, which I really don't think that this 5-team deal has any weight to it. And it's proposed as the Sixers would end up with Damian Lillard and Bradley Beal. The Brooklyn Nets would get De'Aaron Fox, KCP, a 2023 second round pick from the Sixers. The Blazers would receive Ben Simmons, Harrison Barnes, Seth Curry, a 22 first from the Sixers, a 23 first round pick swap from the Sixers. The Washington Wizards would get CJ McCallum, Buddy Hield, Tyrese Maxey, a 24 first round from the Sixers, and a 24 first round swap from the Kings. And the Kings would get Kyrie Irving, Tobias Harris, Nasir Little, a 2026 first round from the Sixers, and a 2022 second round from the Nets. There's also talk that the Spurs are also interested, and they could send DeJounte Murray and White and 2 future firsts for Ben Simmons. So again, like I said, those are just things that I saw that I just wanted to throw out there. We don't know exactly where the Sixers standpoint is, and then we really don't know the true value, as we can easily see, for Ben Simmons. And we can say that his value has dropped. So it's now to the point where, again, like we keep saying, the Sixers will do a deal, but it's going to be a deal that's going to benefit them in the long run. It's not going to be a deal just to make a deal to make him happy, to get him out of town. Okay? So with that being said, it is 10 minutes to 1. NBA preseason tonight. You've got Rockets, Raptors, Hornets, Heat, Nets, Sixers, Pistons, Grizzlies, Pelicans, Jazz, Kings, Blazers, and Timberwolves, Clippers. Also in Major League Baseball playoffs, you have the Brewers and the Braves, the Astros and the White Sox, the Rays and the Red Sox, and the Giants and the Dodgers. Concluding Week 5 in the NFL, Monday Night Football tonight, you've got Indianapolis at Baltimore. As always, folks, you know where to find me. Facebook, Sports Rap Podcast is the group page. At SportsRap_D on Instagram and Twitter. The YouTube page, Sports Rap TV. You can also check the website, sportsrapradio.com. You can also get the audio if you missed